Production of Kansas City Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The airport back in the headlines, why KCI is on President Trump's top 50 priority list, sizing up the Women's March in KC, why a debate over guns on Kansas college campuses is now sparking a police investigation, plus she was rumored as a frontrunner to replace Sam Brownback as governor. So what happened as Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins announces she's quitting Washington and politics? And let's make no mistake, why tragedy is the biggest news story of the week in this place we call home. Welcome everyone, I'm Nick Haynes. It is a privilege to get to share the news of the week with you once again on this program as we go behind the headlines on the local stories of the last 7 days in our metro, pouring through the news of the week. She's long been the nationally syndicated columnist for the Kansas City Star. She now adds Star editorial board writer as well. Mary Sanchez is with us. Mary joins Dave Helling on the editorial pages of the Star. Steve Vockrodt covers business and Johnson County for the Star. And Mike Ferguson covers politics from behind the microphone at KCMO Talk Radio. Now, even before becoming president, Donald Trump wanted Americans to know that improving the nation's infrastructure would be one of his top priorities.
We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, which will become, by the way, second to none. And we will put millions of our people to work as we rebuild it.
This week, the president gives a clearer signal of what those words mean, and it's got the attention of Kansas City leaders. The new Trump administration adds KCI to a priority list of top 50 emergency infrastructure project it wants to fund. It is one of only 2 projects in our bi-state region. The second is an expansion of Lambert Airport in St. Louis. But what is the significance of this list? Steve Vockrodt, you've been digging into the story this week.
Yeah, so the significance of it in terms of long-term future of KCI remains to be seen. Really where this list came from was that the Trump transition team worked with a consulting group to formulate this list of 50 initial projects that they're at least thinking about in terms of a big infrastructure outlay early on in the administration. And they sent it out to the National Governors Association to solicit ideas from their members, which are, governors is the name of the organization would suggest, to get more ideas of the types of projects in their states that they would like to see. So KCI being on this initial list at least seems to indicate that the Trump administration, or at least some members of the Trump administration, are thinking about KCI in terms of its need for some kind of improvement. The document doesn't really specify what. Here's the deal with KCI as we sit here today. There is a plan that the city has formulated with the airlines that does not really lean on federal funding. However, if the Trump administration does start to make federal funding available for this sort of thing, and in the recent past, federal funding is kind of limited for airport projects. If they were to make more money available, I think it would behoove the city and the airlines involved in this KCI process to try and maybe get a slice of that pie.
But that's why it sounds odd, because we've been told all along in this process, when it comes to the future of KCI, Dave Helling, that it was going to be fees, and it was going to be the airlines and what the passengers were actually paying that helped contribute to funding if there was going to be a new terminal. It was nothing to do with federal money.
Right. And if there is some decision now to take general money and send it to KCI, every other major airport in America is going to say, wait a minute, where's my share? Which complicates the politics a little bit. I think we also have to be careful, Nick, because we don't know where the money's going to come from for this $1 trillion infrastructure package that the president has talked about sort of in broad terms, like he talks about a lot of things, but the specifics are very much unknown. And then Kansas City's still struggling a little bit with whether it wants a brand new terminal or a refurbished terminal, whether it would have to go to a vote, not go to a vote. We wrote today in the paper that yeah, we ought to get in line for money if it's available, but there are a lot of steps that need to be taken, including steps that need to be taken here before that money becomes a reality.
Now, we've been told by civic leaders and top elected officials here in Kansas City that they didn't even want to talk about the airport until after the infrastructure election in April. So
Right.
what does this list do this week to change any of the timeline with regards to thinking about the future of KCI? Does it change anything?
I don't know that it necessarily changes anything here because, as Dave points out, I mean, this is a preliminary list, and you know, anytime a new administration takes over in the White House, and I would argue particularly with a president who hasn't had a history in political governance, there are a lot of things that need to get sorted out. The correspondence that the National Governors Association sent out to its members said, you know, there's no promises here on this, what we're sending out now. There's going to be a formal vetting process once the administration takes over, which they now have done, to really see how we're going to spend it, what we're going to spend it on, and where the money comes from.
The ambiguity is the problem, I think, for City Hall and for the airport, the aviation department, because unless you know one way or the other, is the money coming, is the money not coming? The survey showed that the new airport was not a top priority among Kansas City voters. So the more that there could be millions of dollars out there, the harder it's going to be to sell a plan to the people of Kansas City.
As we record this program Friday morning here in Kansas City, tens of thousands are gathering in Washington for the annual March for Life. Hundreds of Kansas Cityans are joining them, including high school students from area Catholic schools. The march comes a week after a big women's rally in Washington and one here in Kansas City this past weekend that organizers claimed attracted 10,000 people, though the Kansas City police chief pegged the crowd at closer to 5,000. But it was certainly more than the 2,000 people rally planners were expecting. What was its value, though, Mary Sanchez?
I think just the fact that you're talking about those numbers. I went down there just to see because at first, yes, it did sound like 2,000 is what the organizers are saying. About midweek, it was kind of the chatter was more, well, maybe we'll get 3,000. When I walked down there, the first person I ran into was the sheriff. And I'm like, what do you think? And he said 5, maybe even 6,000, which is the number that I've been kind of repeating all week. And I think that's a fair number. You know, it was a good group. It was, you know, very obviously peaceful. You haven't heard of anything, which is true of the Washington march as well. It was a wide swath of people. It wasn't just women. There were all ages. There were all races. And that was a lot of the message of a lot of the banners and placards that people were carrying, was that they were just standing up for the voices they see of America.
Do protests, though, change the hearts and minds of people, though, in the long run? I mean, what is the evidence of that?
Well, I think it can be an organizing principle, and certainly in certain circumstances it can provide energy, but specific legislation, specific changes are very rare. You mentioned the March for Life. The March for Life has been going on the National Mall in January for 40 years, and yet abortion law remains, at least the baseline abortion law, which makes abortion legal in this country, remains intact. There are changes, of course, on the state level. So, but it can provide energy and a place for people to meet and think about organizing. And in this case, they were really sending a message to Donald Trump.
I think in the last few years, protesting like this, even on the mass numbers, the numbers were impressive. There's no question about that. I don't think it has the effect because, first of all, these were all issues that were discussed all the way through the campaign, and Donald Trump won Kansas and Missouri just handily, and there was a large march in St. Louis as well. I think at this point we've got everything from peaceful protests like we had this past week to violent protests that we've had around the country. I think that protest just for the sake of protest doesn't have the impact that it used to have, certainly not when you compare it to something like the civil rights marches. But it is interesting, within a couple of days, I want to say the Washington Post, it could be the Times, wrote an article on how some Black Lives Matter activists around the country were resenting the Women's March because of all the attention that they got and how so many people said, look at how peaceful it was, and were being praised for that. And you saw a lot of kind of friction within groups that probably vote in a similar vein. So I don't know that these have an immediate impact on policy, and I don't think they will for a while.
You know what, though? But I tell you, the Women's Political Caucus had a massive meeting this week, and some of that is due to the response and how do we get involved. And so people, you know, definitely, yes, a protest is just a one moment there. You have to do something with it. And that's kind of one of the misunderstandings of what the civil rights movement was in the 50s and 60s. It wasn't about just showing up on a bridge. It wasn't about, you know, just a couple stands that were made publicly. It was a long, progressive campaign. That's where you get the talk of a movement. in long-term coverage. I mean, most of the Black Lives Matters protests were not violent. And I think some of that is the pushback against that they're like, wait a minute, most of us, we weren't causing problems.
Steve.
Right. Well, and the thing with protests is they tend to happen one time, they don't happen again for a very long time. And I think really if they want to have an impact, it should be a repeated effort. And I think there's been some talk about maybe on Tax Day doing another protest in Washington.
Can I just say very briefly, all of this analysis is accurate, but based on the past. Donald Trump is changing virtually every rule about what we understand about politics. And in that sense, a one-off protest might not make a large difference, but the chance that he will trigger other protests is rather large.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it might be the start of something very important in this country.
In other news this week, Overland Park police are investigating a threatening social media message sent to a state lawmaker from Johnson County. Overland Park Republican Stephanie Clayton is getting news attention after introducing a bill that would permanently exempt Kansas colleges from having to allow concealed handguns on campus. Starting in July, all Kansas universities have to permit guns, except in buildings where there are metal detectors or security at each entrance. A commenter on Clayton's Facebook page wrote that she needs to swing from a tree for violating her oath. A spokesman for the police department said they had taken a report on the incident and were continuing their inquiry. Before we get into the details of that specific bill, though, a lot of people are asking, well, how seriously are we to take threats of this nature when pop stars like Madonna go on national television this week and publicly threaten violence against the president?
Yes. I'm angry. Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Okay, so we have public statements like that being made, and then we're worrying about one remark made about an Overland Park state lawmaker. Mary?
It's always a thing of balance. I mean, to me, when I watch Madonna there, she's reading a script. She's performing. It's Madonna. Quite honestly, as a woman who is in the public eye somewhat, you do have to watch it. There are some emailers and some things that I've noted, and I keep a little file of those that do make threats. But you receive some of them, particularly women, unfortunately. So often, you cannot react or overreact to everyone, but you kind of have to keep an eye on it. I think if you're one of these, if you're a woman who decides that every single time someone says something, or that might even actually be a threat, that you take it seriously, you'll drive yourself crazy. But then you have to monitor it, because you never know. There could be some, it was a gun issue. There could be some moron out there who would actually go out and do something.
Yeah, I think the difference here is it's been 20 years since Madonna could even heat up the charts on the music, much less blow up the White House. But in the case of something that could be this personal and this local, chances are there's no threat to the representative. However, when you've got something like that, you would be completely amiss to not at least investigate and just see how angry or how crazy this person is. I am a Second Amendment guy. I'm a pro-Second Amendment guy. Not one single gun owner that I know is anything but horrified when people do stuff like this. I mean, that's something that crosses, I think, all ideological perspectives on this.
And this came about, though, because of a bill that is already going to go into law. It will be law coming July 1st on all college campuses in Kansas that would require them to allow concealed weapons in all buildings, including dorms, unless they have metal detectors in those buildings. The effort that the lawmaker is trying to do there is to prevent that from going into effect. But we know that there's been a change in the makeup of the Kansas legislature since that bill was originally passed. Has it really changed that much, though, Dave? Because it passed overwhelmingly.
We'll see. I mean, there will be a vote, most likely, on this proposal or some proposal to roll back those campus provisions. I think one of the compromise things I've heard about is letting each individual school reach its own decision, make its own policy. And so I think, and there was a huge, a lot of attendance yesterday at a hearing on this issue. It is a place for more moderate lawmakers to sort of focus, and they are hearing from their constituents Nick, that perhaps allowing weaponry to be ubiquitous on campus is not a good idea.
By the way, at the same time lawmakers began those hearings that Dave talked about on the campus gun bill, a Republican state lawmaker from Bonner Springs acknowledged he left his loaded handgun under a table in a legislative hearing room. Representative Willie Dove said he regularly carries the gun with a leg holster, but took it off at the meeting because his ankle was swelling, Mike.
Yeah, talk about going completely face-palming on this. That is when he's a Republican. He's a Second Amendment supporter. I looked up his website on it. A similar thing happened in the Missouri legislative session a couple years ago where a legislative aide forgot his gun in a bathroom. Again, gun owners are the harshest critics on things like this, saying, we're fighting for these freedoms, we're telling people how responsible we are. You have to be extra responsible if you want that freedom to do that. It's embarrassing. Nobody got hurt, thank goodness, but I can see how it could affect the debate.
Well, the bill in Kansas allowing guns in public buildings runs in stark contrast to what's happening in Missouri, where despite setting off explosions with an assault rifle in his campaign ads, new Governor Eric Greitens issues an order blocking concealed weapons from the Missouri State House. The Kansas State House allows visitors to bring in a gun without a permit. So why this bravado on guns during the campaign, and when he takes over office, makes gun restrictions one of his first decisions?
Well, I think some of it works in the campaign. You know, things resonate. We were talking about his commercial. Everyone was, in a positive or negative way. You know, he drew the audience. But once you have to govern, thankfully, our new governor realizes that you have to govern and you have to listen to people. And I know a lot of people have been reaching out to him. The police chiefs here and in St. Louis have. And so he's having those deeper conversations, and hopefully that is going to bring out more compromise, moderation, and not just a voice that's trying to drum up response.
How did you weigh up that, Mike?
I think the optics certainly strike of hypocrisy. I'll say it. I mean, you've got a legislature that is very much in favor of gun rights and passes what people call constitutional carry. You can open carry. You don't need a permit anymore. But don't do it in the building where we pass the law because we trust the people so much. We just don't trust you around us. So I think that, to me, what the governor did, it really sends mixed messages. Either you trust people or you don't.
And there are even members of his own party, of course, who are not happy with the governor's messaging here. Parkville lawmaker Nick Marshall puts a sign on his door suggesting that any constituents upset about not being able to carry a gun in the Capitol could stop by and borrow one of his. Anyone taking him up on that offer?
I don't know if anybody took him up on it.
But the message in that offer, Nick, tells us something very important about the gun debate. It isn't about guns.
Yeah.
It isn't about weapons. It's about the cultural implications of weaponry and the message that is sent to constituents about a cultural range of issues that go far beyond just whether or not somebody can take a six-shooter into the state capitol. You know, you ran a clip of Madonna. Ted Nugent has been running around for years suggesting violence toward Barack Obama and gun rights and eating meat and all. It's a cultural issue. It's used to raise money and to excite passions. And if I had my druthers, which maybe at the editorial board I'll start getting my druthers, we'd get out of politics, get all of this symbolism out and deal with issues that really matter to people.
A lot of area political comings and goings this week. Kansas Congressman Mike Pompeo is officially sworn in as the nation's new CIA director. Meanwhile, another man from Kansas is named to head the FCC. Ajit Pai grew up in Parsons, Kansas. Also this week, she was being rumored as a frontrunner to replace Sam Brownback as governor of Kansas. Well, you can now take her name off that shortlist. Kansas Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins from Topeka has announced she will not seek re-election and will not seek any other political office, including the race for governor. At just 53 years old, and with her party controlling the White House, the Senate, and the House for the first time in nearly 90 years, why is she calling it quits?
Nobody knows, which is actually, it's a pretty compelling political story to figure it out. I think everybody understood she was coming back from Washington. That's a real grind for a lot of lawmakers, and there may be a personal reason for that. Her decision and announcement not to run for governor, though, A, changes that race dramatically, but B, calls suggest that there's something more at work than just not wanting to commute back and forth to Washington. I think reporters are asking, trying to figure it out. There's more to the story than just the tiredness with public service.
Yeah.
Mary?
It's one to stay tuned. You know, one of the things about her leaving, though, is that it's really a loss within the GOP, their female ranks, because she had been in office, since 2009?
In Congress, yeah.
In Congress,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And very high
At the Congress
in the
level.
leadership. Is one of
Well,
the highest
that's the
ranking
thing.
women in Washington.
Okay, but you say that. But can I? So one of our producers said to me before the show, "Is like, well, you never heard her name. You know, did you ever see her
Well-
on any shows? I mean, what did she do?"
Well, here's the thing, is that when you look at powerful women within the D.C. bracket, within Congress, you know, Senate and Reps, it's mostly within the Democratic ranks where women have held the chairmanships and the higher office and the more prominence. Unfortunately, within the GOP, women have done very, very well at the state level. I mean, actually, I think if you marked it out, better than Democrats have. But she was one of these women that was rising, and I don't know. I mean, personal decision, we'll find out later what happened, but now she's out. And, you know, that thinned the ranks a little bit, and they were already
just
thin.
Briefly, I wrote a story on this. Kansas had a woman in statewide office for 50 years.
Yep.
Until 2014. Now it's all men. Lane Jenkins was going to break that streak, and now obviously.
Another observation to make is, though, when President Trump is talking about term limits as a potential option for the country, I checked before the program, there were 46 members of the House and Senate who during the 2016 election said they weren't going to run for re-election during that cycle. So at a time when we say, you know, we need to get rid of people, a lot of members of Congress are leaving based on their own devices, Steve.
Right. And, you know, there's a lot of arguments on both sides of the term limit debate, you know, whether they're good or bad. And it's always kind of been an oddity to me that the president is subjected to term limits while members of Congress and Senate are not. So we'll see where those efforts go.
Well, I think sometimes when it comes to term limits, we ask the wrong questions. Everybody hates Congress, but everybody loves their congressperson. And so to say, you know, should there be term limits in Congress is just too vague of a question. It doesn't get into why people get reelected time and time and time again because of the power of incumbency.
As President Trump this week called for a major investigation into voter fraud, guess who CNN turns to as their experts on the matter?
Is there any reason to think that there was widespread voter fraud, even in the hundreds of thousands, even in the thousands, let alone the millions?
It would be easier to fake a Mars landing than it would be to do that. I mean, you're talking about, in most states, elections are actually run at the county level, and then it goes up the process. It's ridiculous.
Former Missouri Secretary of State Jason Kander couldn't quite pull out a victory over Roy Blunt in the race for United States Senate last fall. So why is his perspective in such demand now?
Well, he was the Secretary of State. He was the chief elections officer of a state. So that in and of itself. But the fact of the matter is that Jason Kander, despite that loss, he didn't have to win that race to really win as far as his career goes. He is still considered a rising star in the Democratic Party on a national scale.
What is he doing now?
He's doing stuff like that. He's going on TV.
Writing op-eds, being on MSNBC, CNN, and raising his visibility and increasing the rumors that he has other political options in mind.
Okay, we're not a sports program, and we know there are plenty of places you can go to get that. But we can't call ourselves Kansas City Week in Review without acknowledging what has been the biggest local news story of this week. Kansas City Royals pitcher Yordano Ventura killed in a car crash in his native Dominican Republic. He was 25. Ventura pitched for the Royals in 2 World Series. Players and team leaders headed to the Dominican Republic as Ventura was laid to rest. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, Royals fans erected a makeshift memorial outside of Kauffman Stadium. The story captured the emotion of the city as many expressed their heartbreak online and in person at the Cape. But I can't remember a time, though, you get so many people so caught up in one person's death. Mike?
Yes, and first of all, the Star's coverage of that in the Dominican Republic was brilliant. It humanized it in possibly the best way possible, so I want to compliment the Star on that. Secondly, the Royals are such a huge part of our culture, and people related to Yordano Ventura. He was a hothead, he was flawed, but he was passionate. He was that good kid that everybody knew down the street who was going to just be really, really successful in life. And I think a lot of people related to him and his energy and his passion. And I think that's why people take this so personally. It's not just that he played baseball.
Mary.
Well, I would add into that, and definitely kudos to Vahe and John Sleezer, who was down there in the Dominican for us. I mean, being able to watch live the footage that we had, or it wasn't quite live, but being able to just watch that was amazing. I think it goes back to when we won. It's like everyone would ask the World Series. The team was so young, and it's almost like we did embrace them almost as, like a parental role. Because at the time when they lost, everyone would ask me, they say, oh, friends from outside of the city, were you guys angry? And it's like, no, you almost just felt like, your kid lost a really big game. There was just so much support for the Royals. So for him to die so young, it's just sad.
City Hall pouring through a new survey this week that claims to show a big boost for businesses along the 2-mile Kansas City streetcar line. 97% of the restaurants, stores, bars, and coffee shops said the streetcar had a positive effect on their business, with 80% claiming an uptick in revenue and foot traffic.
We found that we've had an increase of between 20 to 40%. Customer counts are up. Monday through Fridays has been our biggest increase in our business. We're seeing a lot more people coming down for lunch and shopping while they're down here. So that's been our biggest win for us.
Okay, Steve, was the city cherry-picking businesses to take part in the survey, or was this a comprehensive, independent evaluation of the streetcar's impact?
I don't know with great detail what their methodology was, and there have been a lot of studies about the impact of the streetcar. Some that hold a little bit more weight than others. But it really just kind of makes sense that the streetcar would help with some of these businesses. And really, even during construction, there were businesses that are acknowledging that they were still doing fine. There were some that complained, but there were some that said, no, we're going to have a pretty good year. And it just makes sense. I mean, even just for me personally on an anecdotal level, if I want to go to lunch somewhere in the River Market, it's easier for me to go do that from where I work rather than having to worry about parking or anything else. I can just take the streetcar. It's an easy ride, take it, have lunch, come back. It's kind of a no-brainer.
And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us here at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.